The air tasted like copper and old secrets. Nira West crouched beside the sulfur stream at the outer edge of the dragon preserve, her fingers trembling as she dipped a broken tin cup into the warm yellowish water. Her boots, frayed from overuse, squelched in the soft mud, and her jacket did little to keep out the sharp winds that slid down from the high cliffs. Above her, the sky flickered with the soft shimmer of a solar flare dancing behind the storm clouds. Somewhere beyond the mountains, the gas giant, Zephyros, hung like a bruised fruit in the sky, its rings glowing faintly with radiation. Nira didn't notice any of it. She was listening. The sound was barely there, hidden beneath the wind and the low hum of the terraforming engines back at Kirill Point. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't even consistent. A melody, rising and falling, a haunting tone that didn't belong to any machine or signal. It curled through the trees like mist, tugging at her bones like something ancient remembered. No one else seemed to hear it. She'd asked. Probably just harmonic feedback from the towers, Vane had told her, not looking up from his diagnostics. Don't get jumpy. There's nothing out here. But Nira had grown up listening for things others missed. Her parents, before they disappeared during the refinery collapse, used to say she had a musician's ear. Even after they were gone, melodies found her. Dreams sang to her. And now, so did this song. She pressed her hand to the ground, half expecting it to hum back. Nothing. Just the warm pulse of geothermal veins below the surface. Something moved in the brush ahead. Heavy. Deliberate. Not the rustle of wind or the skitter of wildlife. Nira stood slowly, heart quickening. The melody, whatever it was, had stopped. Then came a growl. Deep and resonant. Not from the throat of any animal she knew. It was like metal grinding against glass, mixed with something, pained. The trees parted. A shape emerged from the mists, tall as a structure rig, and moving with eerie grace. Wings folded along its back like sails. Alabaster scales shimmered in the dim light, catching reflections from the stream. Its head was crowned with ridged horns, spiraling back in elegant symmetry. Each breath from its nostrils stirred steam from the warm waters. A dragon. Nira's legs threatened to buckle. It was real. Every bone in her body screamed at her to run. But something deeper held her still. Not fear, though fear was there, but awe. Wonder. A sense of impossible rightness. She'd seen hollow recordings, of course. Studied illustrations in old academy books. But none of them had captured the absolute presence of the creature now before her. The dragon limped into the water with a low hiss. Its side bore a jagged wound, where a long metallic dart jutted from between scales. The area around it steamed violently. Blood, not red, but silver blue, oozed into the current. Nira took a step forward before her mind could protest. "You're hurt," she said softly, as if speaking louder might shatter the moment. The dragon turned its head. Those eyes, liquid gold with slitted pupils, locked onto hers. Nira went rigid. And then she felt something. Not sound. Not thought. Sensation. "You hear." The words weren't spoken. They echoed through her chest, her stomach, her skin. Her whole body was suddenly aware of itself, every inch vibrating with something larger, older, sadder. Nira's lips parted, her breath catching. "You can speak." A pause. The dragon tilted its head. "Not like you. Feel. Not speak." Her hands trembled. Not out of fear, but out of recognition. The melody, the one she'd heard for weeks, had carried that same rhythm. The dragon had been calling her. "I heard your song," she whispered. "That was you. Half of me." Your voice sang back. It didn't make sense. Not logically. Not biologically. Dragons were classified as apex predators, sentient but not communicative in human terms. That's what the corporate record said. But standing here, in the shadow of one, Nira knew the records were lies. Or incomplete. Maybe both. The dragon's breathing was ragged. It sank lower into the water, flinching as the wound touched the current. Nira moved without thinking, kneeling beside the beast. The air was thick with steam and blood. Her instincts screamed for caution, but her soul overrode them. "Can I help you?" she asked. The dragon's gaze didn't waver. "Fire burns here. Metal poison." "A dart," she said, glancing at the wound. The device embedded in its scales looked like a tranquilizer or tracker, corporate tech, likely from one of Galacorp's security divisions. She'd seen their drones patrolling the preserve from afar. But why had they attacked it? Nira reached into her satchel, fingers fumbling for a packet of medstrips. Not meant for dragons, but they might help. She hesitated before touching the dart. "This will hurt. Pain is known. Worse is silence." She nodded. Gritted her teeth. And pulled. The dart slid free with a hiss of pressurized gas. The dragon reared slightly, exhaling a growl that rumbled the ground. But it didn't attack. It didn't flee. It held her gaze, as if anchoring itself through her presence. Nira pressed a cloth to the wound, then unwrapped the medstrips and smoothed them along the edges of the gash. They shimmered faintly, activating. The bleeding slowed. The dragon let out a long breath. "What's your name?" Nira asked after a while. A pause. "No name in your way. But you may call Kalairos." "Kalairos," she repeated. It rolled off her tongue like the end of a song. "Your voice woke me." Nira lowered herself to sit on the edge of the stream, soaked and shivering. The sky overhead crackled with distant thunder. Night was falling faster than she realized. "They'll come back," she said. "The people who hurt you. They'll track the signal." "Yes. I can hide you," she offered without fully understanding why. "There's a geothermal pocket not far from here. Too hot for drones. They can't track there." Kalairos's head tilted again, something like curiosity blooming in those impossible eyes. "Why help me?" Nira didn't have a simple answer. Part of it was instinct. Part was defiance. But most of it was connection. "Because you listened when no one else did," she said quietly. Kalairos lowered his head until his snout rested beside her knees. The ground vibrated faintly beneath her. "Sing again." Nira blinked. "What?" "Your song is light. Sing again." She hesitated, then took a breath. The melody wasn't from any known language. It came from somewhere deeper. A memory not hers, passed down in dreams. Soft, lilting, mournful. As she sang, Kalairos's eyes closed. The mist thickened around them. The moon rose slowly behind the clouds. And for the first time since she'd lost her parents, Nira didn't feel alone. Daniel Orvan didn't believe in myths. Not anymore. He once did, as a child, before the academy, before Galacorp, before the bitter years spent pushing data through lifeless terminals in a mining satellite that orbited nothing worth remembering. There was a time when he believed in stories, of flame-winged guardians and songs that could calm storms. But somewhere between his mother's last lullaby and his own first kill order, belief had crumbled like the ash fields he'd left behind. Yet here he was. Alone, again, following a whisper through the ancient stone corridors of the pioneer ruins that lay deep in the southern shadow of Epsilon's excess frost line. It wasn't logic that brought him here. It was a dream. No, worse, a memory. He saw her again last night. Not his mother. The other one. The girl who sang in the forest. She had no face in the dream, only a voice threaded with notes he hadn't heard in years. It was the same song his mother used to hum when he was sick. The one she claimed came from the stars, taught to her by a flame that never burned. When Daniel woke, the coordinates were already in his navpad. Now he stood at the mouth of a cave where that flame, once spoken of in stories, might still flicker. The stone beneath his boots bore the marks of an ancient language, etched spirals, worn by decades of acid rain and seismic shifts. The pioneers had carved messages into everything. Some called it desperation. Daniel called it hope. The only thing more dangerous than a human with a weapon was one with a reason to remember. The cave air was warm. Too warm. Not geothermal. Not natural. Something else. He stepped inside. His old scout gear beeped a weak warning, radiation levels slightly elevated, uncharted energy spikes. Daniel ignored it. If this place was as dead as Gallicorp had claimed, the spikes shouldn't exist. 20 paces in, the stone gave way to carved halls, slanted at odd angles, lined with metal veins pulsing with faint light. Daniel's breath fogged in front of him despite the heat. The silence here was thick. Reverent. And then he heard it. Not with his ears. In his chest. A hum. Low. Mournful. Familiar. The same song. The same melody from the girl. He followed it down a winding stair cut directly into the rock, deeper into the heart of the ruins, until he entered a chamber lit by a glow he couldn't place. And she was there. Kneeling at the edge of a stone basin filled with flickering blue light. Not alone. Beside her lay the impossible. A dragon. Not a hologram. Not a projection. Real. Its massive body was curled like a serpent around the room's perimeter, pale scales catching the glow from the basin. One wing stretched protectively near her, twitching slightly. Its breathing was labored, but steady. Daniel froze. The girl turned. Their eyes met. She had short black hair matted with sweat and soil. Dirt streaked her cheeks, and a gash ran along her collarbone where her jacket had torn. But her eyes, they were lit from within. Not with fear. Not with warning. But with recognition. You came, she said, not as a question. How do you know me? Daniel asked slowly. I dreamed of you. He felt the floor shift beneath him, not literally, but something in his foundation cracked. No one had said those words to him in years. Maybe ever. What is this place? He asked, stepping forward cautiously. Safe, she said. For now. The dragon stirred, one eye opening. It didn't growl. It didn't move to attack. Instead, it watched him with an intelligence Daniel had only ever seen in people. Wounded people. His name is Kalairos, the girl said. He saved me. Daniel's breath caught. You bonded with it. He's not in it. Her voice was firm. Not angry. Protective. He nodded, slowly. You're the one who's been singing. The one I heard in the relay broadcast 2 nights ago. Her face flushed. You heard that? I didn't just hear it, Daniel said. I remembered it. She blinked. How? My mother used to sing that same melody, he said. Only she said it wasn't hers. She said it came from someone with wings made of fire and a heart that spoke through dreams. The dragon made a low sound, a rumble that almost sounded like agreement. The girl stepped closer. My name is Nira, she said. Daniel. They didn't shake hands. Didn't need to. Something deeper passed between them. Not magic, but memory. Recognition. Daniel approached the basin. The liquid light inside pulsed with a rhythm not unlike a heartbeat. What is this? He asked. Dragon memory, she said. He stared. It's not blood. It's not energy, she said. It's thought. Kalairos calls it the echo. When dragons dream, their memories become real. They leave impressions in the stone. Songs. Visions. Pain. This shouldn't exist, Daniel said, shaking his head. But it does. She turned to him. Why are you here? He hesitated. Galacorp wants the dragons, he said. Not to preserve them. To use them. They're trying to map their genetic code for weaponization. If they succeed, these creatures, everything they are, will be turned into tools. Nira flinched. Kairos said something like that. There are more, Daniel said. I don't know how many. But I intercepted comms last week. They've found a second nest. They're going to extract it by force. Nira's hand clenched. Help me stop them, Daniel said. Me? She sounded breathless. I'm no fighter. No, he agreed. But you're something they can't fake. Can't replicate. What? A voice that the dragons answer to. Her eyes widened. You think, I can reach the others? I think you already have. A long silence passed. Then Kairos stirred again. The ground trembled gently beneath them. The others sleep. But not forever. Your fire will wake them. Or destroy them. He's right, Nira whispered. This is bigger than me. Bigger than a voice. Daniel sat beside her, closer now than before. Then don't do it alone. She looked at him, really looked at him. And for the first time since leaving Kiral Point, something inside her softened. You still believe? She asked. I want to. And that, somehow, was enough. The sky burned orange with the exhaust of retreating drones. Lisa Kern watched from a rusted fire escape, her breath slow and steady despite the whine of engines overhead. The smoke stung her eyes. Something behind her, a warehouse or maybe a field tower, crackled as it collapsed in flames. Another city, another secret paved over by the corporate tide. She didn't look back. There was no point. Her satchel was pressed tight against her chest, thin and ragged, but it held more than just data. She could feel the weight of it, the kind of weight that shifted how planets turned. Lisa's hands trembled once she reached the rooftop. Not from fear, but fatigue. She hadn't slept in over 30 hours. Her last dose of stabilizer was wearing thin, and the neural tremors were returning, soft like static at first but building. She dropped to one knee and exhaled, opening her calm clip with a flick of her thumb. The interface flickered. Network unstable. Satellite sweep in progress. Remain silent. She laughed under her breath, tired and bitter. Typical. Galacorp's response to truth was always silence first, fire second. Her only hope now lay in the fragments of a stolen signal, one she had barely managed to decode before the lab went dark. A voice, singing, buried in raw comm feed from the southern hemisphere. A girl's voice. Soft, untrained, but resonant. And woven into that voice was something Lisa had only seen referenced in forbidden pioneer records. Not language. Not song. Something else. Something that lit up her scanners like a neural storm. She had to find the source. Even if it killed her. The skimmer she'd stolen 3 hours ago was barely holding altitude, but Lisa coaxed it through the low canyons just north of the frozen ridge line, weaving between jagged outcrops and fog columns. The skies here were mostly clear, too close to the pole for heavy drone patrols, but just warm enough for small camps and scientific outposts. She was following the resonance trail, what little of it remained. The girl's voice left a frequency imprint that shouldn't exist. It didn't follow known spectral laws. It curved in memory space. It broke encryption. Lisa had seen code melt trying to store the waveform. The skimmer began to rattle. Ahead, a rocky plateau rose between two frozen cliffs, wind-torn and lit by pale auroras. Old structures dotted the rise, collapsed dome shelters, long-abandoned research scaffolds, and one geothermal access tower still humming faintly. The signal was stronger here. And so was the warmth. Not just environmental. Emotional. Lisa blinked against sudden tears. Not hers. Not really. Echoes. She cut power and let the skimmer drift downward until it settled with a muted thump. She stepped out into snow laced with ash. The air tasted like forgotten sorrow. He was the first to see her. Daniel stepped from the shadow of a wrecked storage vault, weapon in hand, but not raised. The wind pulled at his coat, and his eyes were sharp, but wary. "You're armed," he said. "So are you. But I didn't steal tech from Galacorp's central lab in Halovale." Lisa smiled faintly. "Then you know who I am." Lysandra Kern. Xenolinguistics, Data Resonance Division. X Division, she corrected. "They burned my name and lab records yesterday." "Then why are you still alive?" She glanced at the satchel. "Because I didn't stop running." A pause. "I'm not your enemy." "No," said a quiet voice behind her, "you're just scared." Lisa turned. The girl stepped out of the geothermal tower's base, her short black hair haloed by mist. She wore no insignia. Her coat was stitched with old pioneer cloth. But her eyes, those were aglow with something Lisa had never seen outside legend. "You're the one who sang," Lisa whispered. Nira nodded. "You heard it." "Not just heard," Lisa said. "I felt it in the data. Like a memory inside a voice." The dragon was close. Though she hadn't seen him yet, Lisa knew he was there. Not because of fear. But because the air bent around his presence. Like music that hovered just before the first note. Daniel lowered his weapon. "She's telling the truth. And you trust her?" "I trust what she's running from." Nira stepped closer. "You're not what I expected." "And what did you expect?" Lisa asked. "Someone louder. Someone who asks questions before listening." Lysandra Kern, once Galacorp's youngest research lead in cross-species semantics, said nothing for a long moment. Then she laughed. Just once. Dry and a little broken. "I used to be." They set camp in the crevice below the geothermal tower, a patch of warmth surrounded by dying stone and memory frost. Lisa passed around rations while Daniel kept watch. Nira sat close to the wall where soft glyphs glowed faintly, dragon memory patterns, etched into the rock not by tool or heat, but by presence. Kalairos emerged from the steam at dusk. Massive, still wounded, but regal. His gaze lingered on Lisa. She did not flinch. Instead, she removed the satchel from her shoulder and placed it gently at his feet. "This holds everything I stole," she said. "They're mapping your genome. Not for medicine. Not for preservation. For weaponized integration. They're building resonance-guided fire systems based on your vocal structures." Kalairos said nothing. But something in the air shifted. Nira reached out, placing her hand lightly on the dragon's snout. "She carries the ash." The voice was not sound. It was sensation. And it came from Kalairos, not as speech but as intention. Nira translated. "He says you've walked through fire. But you carry the ashes with you." Lysandra bowed her head. "I want to be more than that," she whispered. That night, they sat close around the heat core, the three of them. Nira sang again, just once. A brief phrase, unfinished. A melody of morning. A half-remembered lullaby. And Lisa closed her eyes, just listening. Daniel did too. In that moment, the silence between them wasn't empty. It was sacred. "You know," Lisa said softly, "I used to think love was a liability." Daniel glanced sideways. "Was it?" "Depends who's holding the knife." "And now?" Lysandra looked at Nira, then back at the fire. "Now I think love is the only thing they can't replicate." "They'll try," Daniel said. They always do, Nira added. The wind picked up. Somewhere in the mountains above them, the skies filled with drone fire and falling echoes. But in the basin, beneath memory and ash, something fragile held. A warmth not from geothermal seams, but from shared glances and unspoken fears. And between Lisa and Nira, a new kind of silence began. Not the silence of fear. Not of data lost. But of closeness found. The kind you don't rush. The kind that asks nothing but time. Tail Ren Nick didn't sleep near flames anymore. He worked with them. He shaped them. He even respected them. But he didn't rest beside them, didn't let their heat touch his skin too long. Not since the fire on Station Eldon broke containment and took his brother. Not since he heard the scream he couldn't stop hearing in silence. And yet, here he was. The geothermal vent beneath his boots breathed soft heat, casting long golden shadows against the mineral cliffs. Behind him, the auroras above Epsilon 6 shimmered green and violet, writhing like smoke in the upper sky. Ahead of him, a request, no, a call, from an old contact. Not from the living. But from the fire. He'd almost said no, almost turned his back on the encoded message from Daniel, the former scout who once pulled him from a collapsed access shaft 3 years ago and never asked for anything in return. Almost ignored the name Nira, unknown to him then, but oddly familiar now. And he almost deleted the sound file attached. But he hadn't. Because of the voice. Not the words. The voice. Tail had worked with systems that recorded emotion in sound waves. He'd tested flame-sealed linguistics during the war. He knew the difference between human grief and something deeper. This girl, Nira, she carried something in her song that didn't belong to this century. And the last time Tail heard something like that was the night before the fire took his brother. He arrived at dusk, the way quiet people do. With no announcement, no flare, just a soft hiss of thermal stabilizers as his hover sled descended into the narrow basin where the others had camped. 3 figures looked up, 2 familiar, 1 impossibly large. The dragon. Kalairos. His scales caught the dying light like molten silver, eyes glowing faintly in the shadows. Tail didn't flinch. He dismounted and stepped forward. Your tail, Daniel said, lowering his rifle. Tail nodded once. Nira stepped forward, voice tentative but clear. You heard it? He nodded again. Lysandra, who stood a little apart, arms crossed, tilted her head. And you still came? Tail met her gaze. I don't ignore songs like that. You're the engineer? Nira asked. The one who works with resonance heat. I was. And now? Tail glanced around. Now I'm just someone who wants to build something that doesn't get torn apart. That was enough. They welcomed him without ceremony, just space beside the central thermal stone, where the heat hummed low and deep, and the dragon's presence turned silence into something alive. Tail's hands were quick. By morning, he'd reinforced the geothermal tower's failing vents, rerouted the overflow to create a natural heat barrier, and laid out a cloaking grid that masked biological readings within a 3-mile radius. This won't stop them forever, he said. But it'll buy you time. Time for what? Lisa asked. He looked at her, then at Nira. For the others to wake up. Kalairos stirred behind them, his wings shifting with the sound of steel being pulled through sand. The fire beneath sleeps. But not for long. Tail didn't react to the voice inside his head, not with shock, not with awe. He simply nodded, as if confirming what he already knew. Nira watched him. He didn't speak much. But there was pain in him. The kind that doesn't scream. The kind that hums, low and hot, just beneath the ribs. That night, Nira found Tail alone, kneeling beside the fire vents. His coat was off, sleeves rolled up. Faint burn scars ran up his arms, old ones, but layered. He was humming something. Not a song. Just a rhythm. You knew someone who sang, she said, not as a question. Tail didn't look up. He was my brother. She sat beside him, legs crossed. Was? Tail nodded. Station Eldon. Fire breach. Faulty reactor casing. We tried to patch it together, hold it until evac arrived. He stared at the heat rising between them. I got out. He didn't. Silence stretched. Neera let it breathe. Then, after a while, she said, I used to think fire only destroyed. Tail glanced at her. But it doesn't, she continued. Sometimes it reveals. What's hidden under the stone? What's buried under fear? He didn't speak. But his eyes softened. By the fourth day, the group was no longer strangers. Tail and Lisa shared long evenings tuning the resonance blockers, rarely speaking but somehow always understanding what the other needed. Daniel taught Neera how to navigate the canyons, marking silent paths with coded stones. Neera, in turn, sang only once each night, soft lullabies that echoed back not as sound, but warmth. And Kairos? He watched. Always. Learning them as they learned each other. He spoke to Neera most. But he sent flickers of memory to each of them, flashes of firelight beneath ancient stars, impressions of wings blocking out suns, and a memory of a great hall where dragons once sang in circles of stone. He's remembering for us, Neera whispered one night. Even when we forget ourselves. Tail looked at her across the fire, the orange glow catching the scar at her throat. He trusts you. I don't know why. Because you don't want to own him. Neera looked away. Tail added, I think he hears your grief. Like I do. She looked back at him, and for the first time, she smiled. Not politely. Not because she should. But because something in him recognized something in her. And neither of them had names for it yet. On the fifth day, Lisa found a signal. Weak. Distant. But unmistakable. They're moving, she said. Toward the northern nest. Other dragons? Daniel asked. Yes. They've got heavy transport and genetic extractors. They'll wipe the nest clean. Neera stood, face pale. We have to stop them. Tail said nothing. But he rose too. And when his hand brushed hers, even for a second, the fire didn't burn. It warmed.